Hi, my name is Steve Rahi. I am a premier field engineer specializing in management technologies. Today's discussion is part 16 of an ongoing series focused on application deployment in Configuration Manager Current Branch, which of course is part of Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Now, little side comment as we get started with this. I started the application deployment series in Configuration Manager 2012, and the detail that's in that series is still valid today. It's been a while since I've added to that series because we just weren't seeing major changes in the application model. We're starting to. And so this is a new part being added to that series, part 16. I will do a part 17 as well, which will focus on the task sequence integration into the application model, which was introduced in Config Manager Current Branch 2002, right? So a bit of just kind of a explanation, where this is, kind of the large gap between. We're now on part 16. So talking about application groups, right? I want to talk about what they are, and well, let's just see the agenda. So I want to talk about what application groups are, why we care about application groups, and then look at the application groups in terms of requirements, seeing how they work, walk you through configuring them and see them in action, right? Finish up with some troubleshooting. Now, kind of a tangent before I get started, because I'll forget to say this otherwise, right? So the way that I kind of view, this is me, right? The way I kind of view application groups is almost like a tier 2 of control that you could have for your applications. The application model is really strong and has, since it's been introduced, provided significant capabilities. In fact, one of the things that I sometimes will challenge people to tell me is why they need to continue packaging and wrapping things in MSI and so on whenever we have the application model. And so far, most of the thing, well, I can't think of a thing that we haven't been able to accomplish natively with the application model if you really understand how the application model works, the way detection logic works, the way the flow of things work, requirement rules, and so on, right? But application groups actually takes it, in my mind, and levels it up a little bit to make it more linear in view, and kind of you can tell what exactly is going to happen, right? It's an easier way to blend applications together to achieve a goal, right? So one of the things I'll talk about too is Intune. So Intune is part of Microsoft Endpoint Manager and did a session on policy sets. Policy sets is very much akin to application groups, right? Or I should say application groups are very similar to policy sets. Definitely there's differences, right? You'll see a couple, but the concept is the same. Then the third level of applications, at least in my mind, is when we introduce the task sequence integration into the application model, right? We'll talk about that again in the next part of this series. But for a long time, we've talked about how the application model has the ability to control dependencies, has the ability to have supersedence relationships, and so on, right? But there have been certain things that aren't exactly kind of the way that maybe you might need in some corner scenarios, such as no real way to control the order of operation for dependencies. So application groups help with that. Task sequencing is the ultimate end of being able to control how things roll out when you deploy. So we'll save the rest of that discussion for then. Probably to touch on one thing with the task sequences as we go near the end of the session, but just to tell you where we're going. All right, so let's dive in. So what are application groups? Well, so application groups were introduced in 1906. The presentation that I'm showing you today is based on Config Manager Current Branch 2002. Typically, I like to wait until a feature has progressed through pre-release status before I'll do a training session on it, right? But in this case, application groups, really powerful, and wanted to go ahead and talk about it. Like all of the features that I've seen so far with pre-release status, the core functionality is in place. Core functionality doesn't change. There are some enhancements that you will see along the way, right? Being in a pre-release status means that this is a feature that's undergoing active development, right? Please don't confuse that with thinking that this is a beta feature. It's not, right? This is a fully supported, fully tested feature that's ready to go and just being looked at pretty closely by the product team to see what improvements can be made in it to make it even more useful. But feel completely comfortable using these pre-release features if they will help you, right? And so this one certainly is a feature that has already undergone some evolution since 1906. I anticipate additional evolution beyond where we are because it is in pre-release status. Once we get to release, should be mostly good. Application groups also are a way to help you, hey, big surprise, deploy applications. So I put multiple app deployment. What I mean by that is in a traditional application deployment mode, you will need to deploy each configured application individually, right? Well, with the application groups, you don't. You can actually take those individual applications, put them into a single group, deploy that group as a unit, and when it gets into the client, it just goes through the different applications configured the way that you've configured them, and you end up with all of those being installed, which is a great way to be able to control maybe baseline configurations for certain types of applications and devices. There's other things that you might be able to do. Like one thing I think of, and this is kind of in the dependency thing, but one of the things I think of is there are some software products where you need to make sure that, for example, Outlook might be installed before certain Outlook add-ins are installed and different things, right? So it just gives you that ability, bundle that all up together, one application group, one application group, multiple applications, one deployment. Now you might think, well, okay, great, I get it, but I already have certain applications and certain applications are already deployed. Do I need to remove my deployments? The answer is no, right? Application groups are an additional deployment on top of what you might already have. Okay, so why application groups? Well, application prioritization. So this is, let me start in the middle, right? Again, multiple apps, single deployment. We just talked about that. Go to number 3. Being able to simplify dependencies. I talked about that Outlook example with some plugins and so on. There could be other examples there as well. Maybe an application that needs Java version or whatever, and you need to make sure that Java version is there. If it is, then the application is not going to install again, but if it's not, the application will get installed as a part of deploying the application group, right? So within the application group, you add applications, big surprise. But when you do that, you have the ability to prioritize the order in which they install, which is very, very helpful. Again, gives you that very clear vision as to what's going to go on when, right? And maybe an easier vision than seeing it in different places in the app model and trying to bundle it all together in your mind. And so that's why I kind of think of this as a little bit above, a step above in terms of capability, the app model by itself. All right. So application groups, what are the requirements for using application groups? Well, the answer is not many, right? You do need to have 1906 of Config Manager. That's where we first introduced application groups. Your clients all need to be on 1906 for those that you want to be able to accept application group deployments, right? And that's really important because some environments will upgrade their infrastructure and the client lags behind a little bit. So the client, for certain features, that doesn't matter, but for certain features, it does. You need the client to be equivalent to the infrastructure when we're introducing new features like this that requires an update on both ends. Then, of course, you need to have individual app deployments. Well, that's actually written wrong. I wrote that wrong. You need to have individual applications. Those applications can or cannot be deployed. It's up to you. You can use the application group to fully deploy if that's what you would prefer. So in terms of how this works, notice that's kind of sticking out. Let me go ahead and build it out. In terms of how this works, here's what I'm going to demonstrate in the lab. So I have 4 apps, Rich Copy, a batch file, Notepad++, and RoboCopy, that normally I would have individual deployments that would make those install on a machine, on a device, right? And that's worked fine for years. But now with application groups, the application group is more of a container that will contain all 4 of these applications and in priority order. So rich copy will install first, the batch file second, Notepad++ third, robocopy fourth, with a single deployment. Right? So let's get into the fun stuff and actually see how this works. I'm going to go ahead and pull in, well, not how it works yet, configuring to start. I'm going to go ahead and pull in the config manager environment and get the console coming up. All right, so first thing is, launching the console, I want to show you where this is, because again, it right now is a pre-release feature. And so under administration, in order to make sure that you're able to accept pre-release features, if I quit scrolling by it, under site configuration, we'll go to sites, and then on my site is hierarchy settings, right? And so hierarchy settings, you will need to consent to use pre-release features. Now, this is a one-way thing, okay? So be aware of that. And then under the features, updates and servicing, under features, you will see that application groups is right here as a pre-release, and it is turned on. So if that's not the case for you, you will need to go and enable that and then restart your console so that you will see that feature actually showing up in your console. All right. Now, let's explore a little bit more. So the application groups appears under application management. So let me show you first what I've got configured. I have 5 applications, or four applications. I forgot I deleted one. 4 applications configured here. And so looking at this, these are the ones that are out there. I don't have any of these deployed at all, right? So no deployments, they're configured apps, and we're ready to go. Now, I can take you through the details of this, and let me show you a little bit of detail. So I'll just choose the batch file here, go to properties. And one thing, the content is deployed. Now, when do you normally deploy content to distribution points? Well, the answer is you can do it a couple of different ways. One of the places where you deploy content to distribution points is when you actually do a deployment. Again, you can right-click on it and deploy your content or distribute content if you want to right here. That's fine. But if you don't have it distributed, you have to at least make sure the content's on one distribution point when you create the deployment, right? I haven't deployed these. I have deployed the application groups, and that's where I specified my content. Now, that will come in a little bit later as an important thing just to understand, how this works once you create the application group, but we'll leave it there for now, right? Now, other things that are out there. Let me show you actually, before I leave this, a deployment type, right? So on the deployment type is where you configure certain things. Like one of them is user experience. And here is install for system, right? So I'll mention this again, but in 1906, when this first released, this was the only way that we would support applications, right? Your application had to be set install for system. Now, install for user is fine post 1906, right? I'm on 2002, and I believe it was also okay in 1910, right? But just another little thing. Again, I'll mention that again a little bit later. Okay, so that done, let's move down to application groups. So here I have 2 application groups. So I can launch the wizard. I want to show you this real quick, just in case it might trigger something in your own environment, right? My screen resolution on this very small laptop is not at the highest level that it could be. And so I've actually gone, I've provided my general information here. I can provide detail about how this is going to appear in Software Center. Now I get to the application group configuration, and here's the window I see. Well, look at the window, right? There's really, I don't see the OK buttons at the bottom, and I don't see a clear-cut place to add any applications into this window. That button is there. It's way down here, and I don't see it because of my resolution. So if you are in that situation, your resolution is bigger than what is generally recommended for some reason, then be aware that that might be something that catches you. It's not a big deal. Change your resolution. You can adjust that and then come back. And then whenever you actually get into the properties of a real application group, you will be able to see the button to be able to add and so on. So here's the application group. Here's where I have the applications added in order. I actually have this wrong. So I have the batch file first, then rich copy, and Notepad++ and RoboCopy, right? So, but I can add more if I want to, no problem. So these are just the first two tabs of the wizard, and then security if you want to be able to secure this. You can also set security scopes on application groups and so one other thing on the application group that I would show you, if I had remembered that I had deleted the 5th application, I would have added it back to show you. But if you look at, and again, I'll mention this again, if you look at our documentation, 1906 says that the only supported types of applications are MSI and script-based deployment types. And that's true in 1906. But in testing this and getting ready to record this, I actually created an application using the web application deployment type configuration, and I can add that to the application group just fine. So I talked to the product team and asked them, said, hey, this is still in our documentation that you can't do this, but I'm able to do it. They said, yeah, that's right. That was only a 1906 thing. Past 1906, you can do those, and we're going to update the documentation. By the time you see this, the documentation actually may have been updated. All right, and one other thing about application groups. One piece that might be in your mind or you might try is to take the application group and deploy it through a task sequence, right? So that's common because with applications, you will be deploying some of those through the task sequence. So I went and looked at the task sequence editor, and in fact, we don't support deploying application groups through a task sequence right now. Maybe someday, maybe in the future, but right now we don't. So not really a huge deal if I can pay attention to two things at once. Let me go down to the right place. There we go, sorry. Operating system. So looking at the task sequence, just to show you real quick, I don't have one. Either way, if you go into the editor and look, you're going to see there is the option to install applications. But if you look at that step, there is no ability to key into an application group, right? Now, you can have multiple install application steps and install multiple applications at each step. So effectively, you can create your own quote-unquote application group within the task sequence by using multiple install application steps and logic on the task sequence. So not a huge deal, but just check that because something I was curious about whenever I was setting this up, right? So FYI. All right, so that's configuring. Now let's go see this thing actually work. So you see that I have the configurations already in my lab. Let's go back again and review. So I have my application group. Let me scroll up. So I have my application group. There. Configure. Now I have two. And I have two on purpose, right? I have my demo application group, and then I have my rich copy application group, right? So I've already shown you the properties of the demo application group. There are 4 applications. In the rich copy application group, there is, hey, big surprise, 1 application. It's rich copy. And so what I want to do is just go onto the client and show both of these application groups installing. So let me pull in the client that I've deployed to, right? So here is rich copy, and I'm going to just install this, right? So you're going to see this install, not anything huge here. Go ahead and install, come on. Not anything huge here, kind of the way that you've seen applications deploy in the past with Software Center, so not a huge deal, but one thing that I want to show you after we get done installing. All right, so we are installing now, should be installed in just a second, and then Software Center will be updated to where I want it to be. All right, so it is. What do you see? So you see a button here that says uninstall. Hey, that's a big shock, right? Application models had that in it for a long, long time. The reason that you see uninstall is because the application itself has an uninstall command line defined. So this is the time that in general, I would suggest strongly that anytime you have an application that you're configuring, that you take the time to configure an uninstall command line. If you don't, even in the normal traditional application model, you're not going to be able to do certain things, right? Here, you won't have the option to uninstall an application group because you don't have the uninstall commands specified. So specifically to call this out, again, I'll mention this again. In initial releases of the application group in 1906, we did not support uninstalling applications installed by the application group through an application group deployment. Now we do. So you see clearly that in the 2002 lab that I'm using, I have an uninstall command. So I'm just going to go run uninstall, no problem. It's going to go do its thing and take itself away, right? So it should be done any moment. So now we're good, right? So it's taken away. Now I'm going to go run my other one, which will install 4 applications. Take a little bit longer to actually do this one. Come on. And notice this. Now we recognize we have 4 components to this application group. The other one, the rich copy application group, only had 1 app. And so we don't display this. But here we have more than one. And so we'll tell you how many pieces we need to actually process to get things done. All right. So we'll let that finish real quick. So now we're done, and notice where we are. We have all the applications installed, but notice we have no ability to uninstall things. Why is that? Well, the reason is because of the 4 applications, only one of them has the uninstall command line defined. And so if one of your applications in the group does not have an uninstall command line specified, you can't uninstall the application group. The apps that were deployed by the application group can be uninstalled individually, but you can't uninstall it as a whole, right? So let's go actually look at and see what was installed. So here I have Rich Copy is here, Notepad++ is here, so those 2 were installed. Rich Copy was number 2, and I think Notepad++ was number 3. And then also the batch file was number 1, and so all that does is create this file, so it installed. And RoboCopy, all it does is copy itself, and there it is, right? So all good. And so I'm just going to go delete all these. And then I'm going to go, so those 2 don't register in programs and features, but the other 2 do. So I can go there and uninstall, make that bigger, and get those gone. Programs and features, rich copy, uninstall, and then Notepad++ uninstall should be good, right? Okay, so now that we have those installed, right? Again, you can validate by looking at the application. And see, like I did, and do whatever you need to do to make sure everything's working is correct. Again, building the application, make sure that you adhere to the right practices, ensuring your detection logic is right, and so forth, right? Now, in terms of troubleshooting, in case things go wrong, we do have a few logs we can look at, and there are 3 key ones. A new one is called @group_handler, and this is one that I've just edited a bit. So you can actually see this starting, it's with rich copy. So we're going through and we're detecting, here we are, found the app, looking for it. We keep seeing it loop a couple of times, all with rich copy. This is whenever I install just the rich copy application group. But you'll see it circle through, like if we were to look at the log now, you'll see it having circled through the batch file, the rich copy, the Notepad++, all 4 of the apps that are in my app group. And then finally, as we get down, you'll see, here you see the uninstalling. So that I captured that whenever I did this. And then you will see where we actually install. Where did I find that? Actually, the quickest way just to find it is oops, that was my bad. Let me pull the machine back in. The quickest way to find that is to go back and scan the log from the top. So let me go do that and installing, right? And so we'll go down and find next. So here we're actually installing it. You saw the uninstall, but let me look at install as well just by itself, because we'll find other things like install state, installed, right? So if you scroll over and look at the log, I'm looking at Notepad. If you saw it in Trace, you would probably see this broken out. But so we tell you a lot about the application here and processing of the application group. Now the other log that is one that's been around for a while since the application model was introduced is app enforce. So this is where you can actually see the installation starting and all the command line and the detection after the fact, validation and so forth, right? Then you also see if we need to download it, we have handoffs to the components CAS and data transfer service and content transfer manager to do that. And then finally, we have settings agent. So in settings agent, we're actually just tracking along to see what's going on. So settings agent specifically shows the enforcement of specific apps. It records the app group evaluation and details anything related to co-management, which we're not talking about here, but let me expand this out. You'll see select statements here and so on. This is an interesting little side comment, and I haven't traced these down to know for sure, but I'm pretty sure when I say this, right? So we see select statements in a couple of places. We see select statements on the site server. Whenever we're processing against the SQL database, we see select statements in WMI as well. But what we don't see a lot in WMI are some of the more complex select statements. On every config manager client, there is, and this is just trivia, no reason for you ever to look at it and mess with it or change it. You know, on every config manager client, there is a SQL database. It's a SQL Express or Compact or whatever it is database, right? And that's used for managing some of the more complex queries and so on that you might need with the application model and so forth, right? Anyway, so you can scroll through here, and then I put and read through it, right? Then I put a logical break, and I just did this visually for me whenever I'm in here. We see that we're processing through, we're doing our detection, we're doing our enforcement. We can see more detail as we go along, right? Succeeded, state is non-compliant, then we started, actually doing the install, whatever, finally we're done, and then we're doing an update, and we're changing our state and compliance state and upserting assignment state and compliance state, right? So this is where we can actually get in and see what's happening. Again, very simple, edited right now for what I'm doing, but just kind of FYI and what's out there, right? So that is the application group configuration in action. Again, these concepts in here, these aren't hard, but understanding how they work, where they play, how you can troubleshoot them, how things fit together, can give you a lot of power to augment what you have in the application model. Okay, so starting to wrap up. So troubleshooting tips and tricks. Let's start with troubleshooting. So we have both server-side and client-side troubleshooting. On the server side, really everything is pretty normal, right? There's nothing too specific about the server side. The one thing that I will show you, we pull back in the server. So application groups are part of applications, right? Well, applications, if you've watched the previous videos in the series, you will see that applications are based on the configuration item model that compliance settings introduces. Actually, Desired Configuration Manager in Config Manager 2007 started there. And then as we went forward, application model in 2012 was based on that same kind of structure. So it makes sense that the application groups will also be part of that structure. So you can actually go in and see how things look for application groups. And when I show at this level, this is always just education. This isn't suggesting you go touch anything. The application model configuration item infrastructure is pretty darn complicated. And so be very careful about anything you would do with that. Recommendations strongly is don't touch it without someone that absolutely can help you from support being in contact to help guide you through that, right? But here's the database. And so if you go and scan through the table structure of the database, you're not going to find anything that says application groups, right? But let me show you where this actually lives. So we know it's part of applications. We know applications is based on configuration item infrastructure. So I'm going to look here. Select, well, if I type it right, select star from CI_types, because there are multiple types of configuration items. Okay, and so we'll look through. These are all the different types. If I scroll to the bottom, there's one type, which is 29. Actually, scroll up a bit. 29, which is application groups. Right. So the application group is just another configuration item definition. So if I want to go look at what how that's constructed, I can just do a select star from CI_configuration items, where CI_type ID equals 29. And this will pull back only, if I typed it right, only those that are application groups. And I didn't type it right, so what did I do? CI configuration items, where CI type ID, or CI type ID, let me fix that. Okay, there we go. So I had a brain freeze for a moment. So this one, CI type ID equals 29. So let me go run this. There we go. All right, so it limits it down to just the two that I have. Now you might, in some cases, have more entries than this. So at one point when I looked at this, I had my two application groups, but I had 5 entries here. And the reason is we don't immediately delete configuration items. We'll mark them for deletion and clean them up later, and we'll mark which ones are currently in use and so forth, but they aren't immediately deleted. Again, showed you some of that in initial videos in the series. So if we go across, we'll see the detail, the CI values. You can actually click into the XML, which I will in just a minute. You can see policy versions, all the detail in terms of whether it's in use or not, and so forth, right? So this is good. Again, just information. If you want to click in and see the specifics of the package, you can. It's all coded in XML, right, and so forth. Again, so I don't show that to you to suggest that you go into the database and look at these things or mess with these things, but just to kind of show you and give you the idea how all of this fits together. Right? So that's the server side. Now, on the client side, again, everything is normal, except we do have the additional logs, the app group handler.log, the settings agent log for application group specific things, and then we have the app enforce, which has been around ever since the app model was introduced to help show what's actually happening when you go and do an install, right? Okay, so tips and tricks. Okay, just a few here. So taking a new application and adding it to an existing application group, we've done that, right? I added my 4 applications to my application group that was there. We configured it, deployed it, we're good. But here specifically, what if you do that and you want to then add a 5th application to that application group, or a 6th, or whatever? Well, you can certainly do that. Here's the only thing. So if after deployment a new application is added to the group that you've created, you have to manage separately the distribution of the content to the distribution points, right? Not a huge deal, but just know that it's not something that happens automatically. Another item, so application content being updated. So if you have an application that's in your application group and the content for that application is updated, then you need to go to the individual application and update the distribution point so the new content actually goes out for that application. All right. Deployment type. So mention it again. In 1906, only install for system was supported. Now, the other types are fine as well, right? After 1906, we added in support for those. In 1906, only MSI and script-based deployment types were supported. Again, after 1906, the others are supported as well. No problem. Exporting and importing, that's great for applications. No support for that with application groups at all. Restart. So be careful. Don't add applications that need to restart or restart during the installation to an application group, not supported, right? If we do that, then the system will restart and we lose control of what comes next whenever the system comes back up. A task sequence might be a good idea for something like that because we do have control in a task sequence of when restarts happen and how to do those things, right? User groups. So we did not support user groups in 1906. Past 1906, we do. Uninstall was not supported in 1906. Past 1906, it is. And then here's just a little interesting observation. All right, so actually working through this, testing this a little bit, tried to actually create a scenario where, well, let me just walk through it. So I had my application group that has 4 applications in it. During testing, I created a 5th application and added that application. Well, let me just show this to you live, right? Let me just show this to you because I have one application group here. Okay, so let me start with my client, right? So here's my client. I see my 2 deployments of my application groups. You've seen me actually go through and work with them, right? Cool. So let's pull this out of the window and let's pull back in the site server here. Okay. So now I have my application group. This particular application group has 4 applications in it. Haven't changed it. Everything's good. So application groups, here we go. Right. Now I'm going to go and delete an application. I'm just going to take Robocopy and say, hey, Robocopy, go away. Right. Let's go ahead and delete you. So this might be something that you might think to do. So you're going to go and delete an application that actually is in an application group, right? So that deletion is going to take place, go forward, no problem. Robocopy is deleted, but I go back to my application group thinking, hey, that was removed from the application group. And guess what? It was, but guess what? Here's what you're going to see. Bam. Unable to load information because the definition still thinks Robocopy should be there. We've just deleted Robocopy, and so this is now messed up, right? I can go in and add comments. I can do whatever I want to here, and it doesn't matter, right? It's still messed up. And so one other thing that I'm just checking here because 1, I want to show you, but 2, I'm interested, is I saw after I did that the first time that my deployment of that application group went away. And I'm curious now that I've done that, the deployment is still intact, but I'm curious now that I've done that, if I check in policy here, if that application group actually goes away from Software Center because it's now kind of in a broken state. So I'll sit here for a minute, and I'm not going to make you wait, but I'll sit here for a minute and see if this in fact does go away. Give it one refresh, and then if it's still there, I'll pause the video for a minute and we will wait on it. Okay, so good enough. Now, just that quick, check in a policy cycle and come back. The application group that I had deployed and is still deployed because of that snafu that I made is no longer there, right? So it's gone from Software Center on the client and is not deployable because of that, right? So again, this feature, very useful. Don't shy away from using it, but it is pre-release, and this is something I've actually reported up. Maybe even by the time you watch this video, it will be fixed, but have shared this forward as a bug with application groups, but I wanted to show it to you so you would see it. All right, and that's it, right? That's application groups. Very, very useful feature. Wanted to kind of walk you through how it works, show you some of the details. And so we will finish the session. We will talk about task sequences in the next installment of the application group series. So we will see you next time.